Alright, we got a slideshow for today. Alright, from the beginning. Alright, correspondence course of the U.S. Army Transportation School Railroad Operation Theater Lesson Booklet, TAMS, Sub Course 640, March 1976. The introduction: military railroads operate basically on the same principle of the commercial railroads. Locomotives, railways, rail cars load the freight passenger over miles. Are called the division. The train movements are controlled by some sort of scheduled signal communication. Some have superiority over the others. The transportation TRSs and mission operating maintain military railroads and theater operation organized like any commercial railroads in the United States, or to carry out the functions of the train operation, maintenance, way, maintenance of equipment, train and control. Between two types of the railroads, however, the bigger the difference. The civilian railroads are built and operated to make money for their owners. They compete with each other. They compete with each other. The other make convenience to the passenger and shippers, while they must meet all the legal requirements set up by the Interstate Commerce Commission, Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, and the Association of American Railroads, as well as the agreement with the Organization of Labor Groups. Military railroads, on the other hand, may be operated economically but the first economic is not money, time. It's not money. Time and material manpower are the principal things that must not be wasted. They bring profit to our government in the forced success of the battle. Convenience must be sacrificed to get the troops to supply where they need on time, and the first aim of the TRS, or the Transportation Railway Services, and theater operation military needs to become before legal requirements of manpower is used to the maximum. Many problems must be faced before solving a railway service, and the theater operation service may be started in three-phased operations are used to obtain the maximum service of the railways and their facilities. For the study of this first chapter, the reference you should be able to describe the basis for selecting rail lines. Phases for the operation of the line are in use. After studying Chapter 2, you should be able to explain how the transportation services is controlled, why it must have a close working relationship with the other agencies. From your study of Chapter 3, you should be able to describe the type of the trains, procedures, and operating them. And Annex A is provided to help the reader understand manual block operation described in Chapter 3. 1.1. General. Military forces operating with a theater generally are using existing railways because the construction of new ones is time-consuming and expensive. When existing rail lines are selected for use, the tactical situation natural influences the selection. For example, those leading for the running parallel to the rare areas of the battle lines are extremely valuable for rapid troop and supply movements. However, vulnerable are the enemy. However vulnerable are they to enemy penetration? The selection of a rail line also depends on not only its strategic importance to the operation, but also technical physical characteristics such as yards, shop facilities, and tracks. The chapter describes why one rail is selected before another, and it ends with the explanation of how Transportation Railway Services has solved the problem finding enough skilled men to operate maintaining trains and all facilities required to keep them running. 1.2. Strategic importance. In theater operations, the highly developed rail selection of certain lines over others is made by the basis for the strategic importance of military operation. First, what is planned strategy of attack, and what is probably a probable objective of the operation. The answer to the question will certainly help the planners select the railway most important as support lines. Second, will the lines be advanced of lands? Second, where will the lines of advance be? Rail lines leading the rail general direction of the lines advance for the selected primary supply route. Third, what enemy disposition before making a decision, the responsible for selecting the best rail lines wants to know the strength of enemy forces. They are located at the typical units in the strategic locations. Rail lines are vulnerable to enemy penetration. For instance, if you knew a hostile unit was positioned so that it would pose a threat to the railway operation in a certain area, you would select, if possible, a rail line that would avoid the area. After the primary rail lines have been selected, alternative lines should be chosen in the case that others cut off and the enemy action tied up in the railway accident impaired by the washout, landslides, or floods. 1.3. Technical aspect. Basic operation railway, highly technical business. A great deal of the thought must be given to the technical aspects. Existing rail lines, facilities, and rail operations are to be successful. Some of the most important technical characteristics must desire undesirable as described in the following subparagraph. Classification of the railways. Railways are classified and according to the gauge. The distance between the heads of the parallel rails measured from 5/8 of an inch below the top of the rail. This measurement is shown in the broken and inserted sketch. The general classification of standard, broad, narrow, and meter. Approximately 60% of the railway mileage in the world is standard gauge, 56.5-inch wide. Broad gauge railways are 66-inch, 63-inch, and 60 inches wide. Narrow gauge are 40 to 30 and 36-inch is narrow, wide, and meter gauge railways are 39 and 3/8 of an inch wide. For the defense of some countries construct railways with different gauges from that used in neighboring countries. The railway equipment built for one gauge does not operate on the other gauges. Track gauges vary within the country and area from the country with the from the continent to continent. Table I present the top track goes in the principal countries and regions of the world. Describes the physical characteristics of railway system. Theater operations to be large enough, complex enough to afford the choice of the parts or ports to be used. Certainly, the characteristics desired must examine, but because they influence decision in selecting one railroad instead of the other. Here is a map of the gauges for all the different railway, either being unique world railways being converted to 56.5-inch, evenly divided by 66 and 3/8 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch narrow. The stereo tracks are parallel to the Panama Canal, almost evenly divided between 66 and 39 and 3/8 of an inch, comparably negligible to about 56.5. Yard terminals. Without adequate yards, the terminal main lines become congested whenever the possible terminals should certain the tracks for receiving and classifying cars making up the trains for the departure of the tracking. These yards show them being long enough to hold the longest train to be operated in the rail division. Facilities are needed to spot car to unload properly, return empty services. Terminals should include the engine house, car repairs, fuel, water stations, and building 2, the houses of the crews of railway battalion. The heavy railway maintenance and railway equipment require adequate shops located in the near yards and terminals. 2. The single, double, and multiple track turning density, overall rail capability, the great effective of the type of the number of the tracks. This usable double track train must operate in both directions without delay in schedules. However, the transportation railway service often takes usable parts of the damaged double track to make one single main line track with good passing track. Seasonal road bed, good ballast, heavy road bed ballast, and weight of the rails affected by the speed and weight of the train. The railway season of the road bed, the best ballast, heaviest rail is selected. The number, the interpretations of the train operations caused by washouts and buckled rails is generally reduced. 4. The slight grade in the curve of operating the train in the mountain steep grades require more motive power. Steep grades are usually require pusher engines at the rear of the train, 2 or more locomotives pulling or double heading at the front of the train. Short rails, strong pulling, sudden back braking are hard on the rail cars. Require more maintenance that use fairly level. The running of the time over the rail is greatly increased by the line of the sharp and long curves. The speed can be reached and straight run for the truck cannot be maintained on the current track. The idea of the railway, the no grade in the curves, that is never realized, but the rail lines at the slightest grade and the fewest gentle curves should be selected. 5. The adequate siding and spurred sidings and the passing track should be long enough to permit the longest train division clearly the main line track completely. Spurs are short rail lines extended from the main line that can be used to load, unload cars or store cars. They are long enough for one train that can be held on them with another train passes the main track. Although the spurs are desirable, they are not major basis for selecting rail lines. Strong bridges and tunnels of sufficient clearance strength of railway bridges directly affects the kind of locomotives operated over them. If the bridges must be rehabilitated, constructed, they should be made enough to support the locomotives to be run over them. Any tunnels on the railway should have sufficient clearance to allow the passage of such wide and high loads of bulldozer cranes. Undesirable physical characteristics of the railway should be the minimum number of vulnerable parts where the traffic could possibly interpreted. Tracks located near the high banks of the streams are highly susceptible and washout floods. Tunnels of the restrictive clearance preventing the movement out Outside equipment, long bridges and bridges over the deep and wide streams that are vulnerable to the enemy's attack, and properly constructed terminals cause congestion. Deep cuts, high hills should be avoided whenever possible. For existing facilities, as the theater operation expands, force advances, existing tracks and facilities are used to make as much as possible. Captures are rehabilitated when needed. The construction of new track is avoided, if possible, because of the manpower required for it. However, when the new construction were to take less time than the manpower rehabilitation, it may be advised to construct a new track and facilities. The facilities that may require rehabilitation, new construction, are yards or sidings of the full water station, signal system, telephone, telegraph lines, engine houses, where the rehabilitation existing facilities to construct. No one is depending upon them being ready for immediate rather than permanent use. The following are general regulations covering the construction of the rehabilitation for service operations. Mainline siding. When the new construction required for the planning, location, layout of the track is important to take care of the new, not only the current needs but the future requirements. The rehabilitation general track for the track surface must be good enough to meet the immediate requirements. The track improvement is undertaken when necessary to meet the minimum requirements for the safe operation. Water and fuel stations. A suitable facility is used for the fuel and water stations. However, there are no water and oil stations exist. They may be improved by placing the filled rail tank cars and strategic planning along the line. However, here are too many ways. Here are two of many ways to improve coal stations. Neither the steam locomotive are in use. Loaded cars can be replaced on a ramp. The coal emptied into the locomotive tenders. A hopper containing the coal may be placed on the siding of the coal shoveled by hand into the tenders, unloading the openings in the car. Equipped for the doors, discharge lading. Single system only. New construction rehabilitated line. Single and simplest kind of installed automatic block signals, interlocking the switches and used to maintain only when already in existence. If used, however, they require for the tight security senses, they are highly vulnerable to sabotage. Okay, D. Telephone and telegraph lines. The mostly dependable, expedient methods of dispatching trains is by telephone, but existing telegraph are easily converted for telephone operations. When the siding of the equipment of the telephone boxes, train crews can add a train dispatcher and maneuvering trains to emergency. Engine houses. Roundhouses and turntables are easily recognizable from the air and subject to enemy aerial bombardment. Such engine house facilities may have to be avoided. If the roundhouse or turntables do exist, all precautions should be taken to ensure the locomotives will not become useless in the facilities or disabled. New construction engine houses should be simple frame structures with complicated windows and doors, without complicated windows and doors. Wise like one sketches are needed to change the direction of the engine. The pencil trace on the route of the engine train takes the lead of the main line through the switch A, continues down the Y until it clears the switch C, then back past switches in C and B. Now in the main line, already ready to run for the opposite direction. 1.5. The phase of the operation. Theater terminal limits expanded the probable supply people of the railway operations acute to cope with the problem. The transportation railway services sets up the rail operation. 3 phases is to allow employment skilled civilians in rear areas, release military men for the use of forward areas. Since phases depend upon existing situation, the order in which the phases are put in effect does not follow the set pattern. They are discussed in paragraph 1.6, 1.7, and 1.8. 1.6. Phase 1 carried exclusively by the military. Phase 1 operations normally used in combat areas. Immediately following the successful establishment of the lodgment, the military sense of the lodgment means the occupying and the holding of the position of hostile territory. For example, gaining a beachhead. Phase 1 operation is used more than often and near the combat zone when effective control operating existing lines can be ensured. Having the railroad troops under the unified command using a phase 1 operation forward arm areas. There are being operations required because of the Geneva Convention. Civilians cannot work in the combat zones. They use civilians poses language difficulties. Also use the military railroads ensure the security railways and forward areas. Security demands of military men may be used because of the training and discipline they obey the responding to orders immediately. The phase 1 operations may be continued immediately in areas and continued indefinitely in areas critical to the military operations such as ports, key terminals, and lines of limited capacity. Normally, phase 1 operation in effect for the geographical area of the theater subject to enemy action. Look at figure 1.1. Here's the combat zone with the railheads and the terminals from First Division, the Second Division, Third Division, Fourth and Fifth Division, and Sixth Division over a communication zone. And the rail ports port B, C, D, E, and railhead 1 and 2 from port terminal. Alright, assume the theater extends inland on the port terminal, a point halfway between the terminals B and C. Phase 1 would be used because of the whole area is in the combat zone. However, the figure 1-1 shows that the expanding theater with the combat zone far enough to forward and omit the communication zone. The comms, COMMZ, is the comm zone, communication zone. Phase 1 could be infected the 4th and 6th rail divisions. As you read on you will see that how phases 2 and a combination of phases in 2 and 3 phases could be used in the other divisions. Fit 17 Phase 2. Phase 2 is a joint civilian military railway operation in the military retaining control. When the combat forces may move forward, the communication goes relatively stable and secure. The Phase 2 operation quickly begun, and several important advantages to local economy is added, restoring civilian railroads to their job. The rail transportation capabilities increased by the type of the operation. Some civilian trains may be allowed to operate, although military trains have been priority. Civilian traffic may be permitted insofar that it does not interfere with the military operations. Look again in the figure 1-1 picture. Picture of the theater is having an advance far enough inland of the port terminal to take the terminals D and E, opposed to the rear limit of the combat zone located in midway between terminals C and B. If there was true Phase 1 operations, you would be used in 3 and 5, 3D and 5, the 3rd and 5th, and the 4th and the 6th Division Phase 2, and for the 1st and 2nd Division Phase 2 also provides efficient accelerated transition from Phase 1 to Phase 3. In the next paragraph, you will see that Phase 3 is begun in theater. Phase 3 is an operation conducted by civilian military supervision, usually employed by the railroad areas communications zone. Phase 3 releases most of the military railroads for the duties of forward areas, and more civilian area employees are restored in the jobs, helping the local economy. Additional civilian trains may be operated because of the increased rail transportation capabilities. All Phase 3 may be used immediately upon entry into the theater. Highly improbable, however, when Phase 3 operations in effect, the method of training movement of the best understood civilians should be adopted. The careful planning of the necessary officers, transportation, railway services, putting military trains and civilian trains schedule. Civilians should be thoroughly instructed in military railway transportation procedures and requirements before the operation starts. Necessary bilingual documents should be prepared both in English, local, and language. And look at the figure 1-1. The military road net in the expanding theater. The theater may be developed in Phase 1, Phase 2, as explained in paragraph 1, 6, and 7. Now, phases operation for the theater becomes when the trained civilian railroads have been oriented in military procedures. Necessary military documents for the prepared Phase 3 can be used. 1st Division and 2nd Division, located entirely with the communication zone, could use Phase 3 operation. Division 3 and 5, located within in the communication zone further forward than the 1st and 2nd Division, could use Phase 2. Because of the 4th and 6th Railway Division, partially with the communication zones, partially with the combat zone, Phase 1 would undoubtedly be used for them to strictly military control. Here's an example. Then, the situation permits the maximum use of civilian railroads. Rear areas release military men of the duty. Forward areas, keeping in the mind that both phases and Phase 2 and Phase 3 may suspend replaces by Phase 1 at any time should the military necessarily require it. 1.9. The summary. A great deal of the planning is operated with the transportation railway service beginning in the operation theater's first big task was to find out the rail lines that exist, then choose the most valuable, the supporting the military operation. Selections are made of the basis of force that become objective plan lines of advance, enemy strength, location, and although probability it will necessary to use existing rail lines. If there is a choice, though, the most favorable technical characteristics are listed. Adequate yards, terminal shop facilities required for the main lines can be kept open. Rail cars can be unloaded, loaded, and they made up into the train, ready for the departure. Rail equipment can be received. Heavier repair, maintenance, and its needs. Double track allows the train to operate in the two directions. Partially damaged, at least one track can be repaired for the main line at adequate passing tracks. A single road bed of the ballast waiting the truck track determine the weight of the speed of the trains, while the line, season, roadbed, good ballast is heavy. The railroad is selected. The rail lines with slight grades and few curves require less motive, allow higher train speed, and are not harder equipment as those in steep grades or short, long curves. Bridges must be strong enough to hold up the heavy weight of the locomotive. Tunnels must be high and wide enough to allow the passage of the military equipment. As theater operations expand, captured rail lines at the facility is rehabilitated if needed. If possible, only where the adequate military needs are, new ones are constructed to increase the rail transportation capabilities in an expanding theater. Three phases of operation are used. Phase 1, employing only the military used in combat areas immediately after gaining allotment such as the beachhead. Phase 2, using a civilian's military later supervised position in a normally established forward areas communication zone. Phase 3 sets up a rear areas of the communication zone, usually most civilians under military supervision, thereby releasing military railroads for duties in forward areas. In the phase 2 and 3, and the local economy helped because some civilians are restored to their jobs and some civilian trains may be operated. 2-1 General.